it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Lawn Fawn's Little Woodland Library add-on, treat cart add-on coffee, Terrific Day, and Porcupine for You. So I've stamped those images out on 2 panels of Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm going to start with my squirrel, and since red squirrels are my favorite animal, I am going to color this one to look like that using E13, E15, E17, and E18. I absolutely adore this image so much. What could be cuter than a squirrel reading a book? I just love it so much. I started with that E18 to lay in some shadows, blended out with the E17, then feathered in a bit of E15 and just left a little space on the face and the top of the leg and the top of the tail for the E13. I'll also use these shades to color in my donut, so it can be an apple cider donut, but I skipped the E18 and just used the other 3 shades. Then I'm going to move on to my owl, and I'm going to go with some E70s. I'm using E70, E71, E74, E77, and E79. So for the outer part of the body, I'm only using the darkest 3 shades. So starting with the E79 for my shadows, and then I'm blending out with the E77, saving a little bit of room near the forehead area and the top of the wing and the side of the body near the belly for that E74, which is going to be the highlight. Then for the belly part, I'm going to start with the E71, blend that out with the E70, and I will bring in W00 to soften that just so it has a nice light area there on the belly. Then I'm going to move on to some E40s. I'm using E43, E44, E47, and E49 for the mole. So I'm adding that E49 to the hands and feet, and then just a tiny shadow in the crease of the book on his face, and then blending out with the E47. I'll use the E44 to fill in his hands and feet, and then add a bit of that to the face, but I'm going to use the E43 on his face near his eye so that you'll still be able to see it. And I also colored in his nose with the E49. Then I'm going to go a bit lighter using E40, E41, and E42 for his muzzle. And I'll also do my takeaway coffee cup with this combo, so it can be kind of like a light brown, like a typical coffee house to-go cup. And then I am also going to bring in E43 because I forgot to do the sleeve, and I wanted that to be a little bit darker so it looks like cardboard. So I used E43, E42, and E41 for that. Then I'll use those same shades for the glaze on my donut. So it's just like a typical powdered sugar milk glaze, but you can see a little bit of the donut showing through. And then I'll use the E41 and E40 to color in all of my book pages, just a little E41 in the crease of the spine, blend it out with the E40, and then I'm leaving a little bit of white on the edges of the corners. And I also use that for my marshmallows. And the coffee mug in the center, I'm also coloring with E41, blended out with E40, and left a bit of white for the highlight. Then I'm going to move on to E50, E51, E53, and E55 for my bunnies. I'll use the E55 for the shadow around the back of the head and on the base of the ears and all of the paws. The baby I'm going to color to match, but I'm just going to do something a little bit different for his patterning. So the mama is going to be almost a solid brown with like a white patch around her muzzle. And then the baby is going to have half of his face brown at a diagonal and the other half of his face white, just for something different. So I started with the E55, like I said, for the shadows, blended out with the E53. Then I used the E51 and then just a tiny bit of that E50 to transition into the white areas on both of them. I really love coloring bunnies. They're one of my absolute favorite critters to color just because there's so many different patterns and details that you can add. So I'm going to also use these shades for the muffin. I thought maybe it could be like a apple spice muffin or something like that. And then I'm going to use the E53, E51, and E50 for the cut part of the wood, and the E50 and E51 for the white parts of my fox. And then I will do the nut part of the acorn that I stamped on the bunny's books. And then I'll keep the E55 and add in E57 and E59 for the bark of that little stump. And by the way, that second sheet of images I am coloring off screen, so I'm going to use these same combos for the wood table. I thought about showing it all on screen, but this video was already so coloring heavy that I just decided to concentrate on the main images, and I am using the same color palettes for the images that are on that second sheet, and I will show it to you at the end of the video. I also colored in the little iced coffee drink, which is going to be an iced mocha latte, which is my go-to drink of choice if I'm getting something cold. If I'm getting something hot, it's a regular mocha. And then I'm going to move on to some toner grays so I can do my skunk. I'm using T0, T1, T3, T5, and T7. So just the darkest three shades for the black parts of his body. So I'll add some of that to the underside of his tail and also to the tip of the tail because it's turned down away from the light, and then to the base of all of his feet and his ears. And then I'll start blending that out with the T5. I want to leave a white streak down the center of his forehead as a skunk would normally have. So I'm just working my way carefully toward that area, and then blending out with the T3. And I also skipped over the part with his glasses until now because usually things that are behind glass do look a little bit lighter. So I'm using the T3 for the outer edges of that, and I'll blend those out with the T1 and add a touch of that to the lower part of his cheeks and to the tip of his tail and the base of his tail. I'm also going to use these shades for the little coffee maker espresso machine back there. I'm doing the lower part that's more recessed to be a little bit darker to show that it's in shadow, and then the top and bottom are lighter, and then going back to the darkest, which on that item is the T3 to fill in the buttons and the spout. And then I'm also going to do my little chalkboard, and I stamped I love books on that because I just thought that would be a fun detail, because this is going to be a fall book club meeting at a coffee shop or at a park with a coffee stand. I thought that would be a fun place to have a book club meeting. And then I'm going to move on to my fox, and I'm using my favorite combo for foxes, which is YR12, YR14, and YR18. So I am starting with that YR18, blending out with the YR14, and then I'll use the YR12 for the highlight. And by the way, I do have a video on my channel on how to color foxes in 6 different ways if you're looking for different color palettes. And I'll give you a little hint that the next critter that I will be featuring in multiple different ways is also on this little panel right here. So yeah, I'm not going to say which one it is, just in case the video hasn't come out yet. I think it's going to be the video after this one, so you won't have to wait long to figure out which one it is. But anyway, I am also using this color palette for some of my fall leaves so that I can create a nice autumnal scene, just hopping around and picking a few different ones to have in this burnt orange shade because I want to have different colors on this scene. So all these tiny leaves, by the way, are from the Porcupine for You stamp set, which I just really love because they're such a small, little dainty size. I think they work perfect for the scale of these critters. Then I'm going to move on to my next combo, which is a red combo, but it has a little bit more of a salmon-y tone to it, and that is R12, R14, and R17. I'll do a few more of my fall leaves. And then I'm also going to do one of the book covers. I wanted the book covers to also be in the same fall shades as the leaves. And I decided to go with the one that the skunk is holding because I just think that red and black look very striking together. So I'm placing that R17 on the spine and down toward the inner edges, and then blending out toward the top corners with the R14 and then the R12. And then while I'm in the R's, I'm going to go ahead and add some rosy cheeks to my critters before I forget, using R11 and R20. I'll also do the noses of my bunnies and the inner ears of the bunnies, the skunk, and the fox. So I just used the R20 on the cheek and then blended out with the R11, same for the ears. But it didn't really show up on the little squirrel or the mole, so I'm going to bring in R22 and just add a touch of that so that it'll stand out a bit better. Then I'm going to move on to a golden shade, and I'm using Y11 with Y21 and Y26, and I'll just pick a few more of these leaves just to have a bit of a brighter tone on there. And I also added a bit of the Y21 into the red book, just for those little cross lines. And then I'm going to deepen up my red combo to more of like a cranberry or a maroon with R46, R56, and R59. And I'll do the book that the mole is holding, and I'm doing it the same way with the darkest on the spine and toward the inner corners, and then the highlights toward the upper outer corners. And then I also did the little heart on the I Heart books and a couple more of the leaves. And I'm also going to end up doing the frame of the chalkboard sign. And I did the straw in the plastic cup. I used the R56 for the part that's in the drink because that would be a little bit darker, and then the R46 for the part that is above the drink. And then, like I said, I did the chalkboard stand as well. So I'm using this combo for every other stripe on my treat cart, and I just thought that would be kind of like the colors of the treat cart. It's kind of like a burgundy and gold combo for that, and so I wanted this chalkboard to match because branding, you know. I just thought it made sense to have it go together since it's owned by the coffee shop. Then I'll move on to some greens. I'm using G40, G43, and G46, and I'll do the book that the bunnies are holding, just carefully coloring around that little acorn. I really love this combo for greens for fall because they're just a little bit more diluted. They're not quite so bright, and you know, they don't remind you of spring. They look more like just a fall green. So I'm also going to use those for my grasses. And then I'm going to introduce a cool tone into this warm color palette just for something a little bit different. And that is going to be aqua. I'm using BG10, BG11, and BG13. And I'm going to do the book that the squirrel is holding. I'll also use the BG10 to add a bit of shading to anything that's supposed to be clear, like my plastic cup and the glass in the 2 pairs of glasses. And I'm also going to use this combo for the mug with the marshmallows, which I'm imagining is hot cocoa. And I just shaded on the right hand side and blended toward the left. And then I'm going to go back to my gold combo to do the last book because I forgot to do it when I had that out. So that's going to go on the Little Foxes book, which I stamped Forest Tales into from the Little Woodland Library add-on. There's a bunch of different titles that you can stamp on there, but I thought that they could all be kind of reading the same book since they are in a book club. I did 2 more of the mugs with that combo, and then I'm grabbing a black Sakura jelly roll pen to go over the eyes of the critters that have their eyes open. Then I'll bring in the second sheet of images so you can see them all together and trim them out with their matching dies. For my background, I'm starting with a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock, which I trimmed down with the largest of the small stitch rounded rectangle stackables, which are brand new from Lawn Fawn, and I am going to do my background on this piece using 2 different stencils and some Distress Oxide inks. So for the sky, I'm using the Cloudy stencil and some Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink. I think that goes really well with the aqua tones that I used for the Copic coloring. And so I'm just going to turn that stencil so that I get a different cloud formation as I work my way down. I want about half of the panel to be clouds. So I'll take that down and just add that, but they are going to overlap a little bit because I want the background to look seamless. So I'll add a little bit of color to that bottom row of clouds so they don't look so stark white. And then I'm going to take the Slimline Grassy stencil and just hold that in place about halfway down the panel. And I'm going to start with some Bundled Sage Distress Oxide ink. Again, it's a little bit of a duller green, so I think it works great for fall cards. It's not quite so vibrant as like a Twisted Citron or Mowed Lawn. And then to darken that up just a little bit, I'm going to add some Forest Moss, which I just got this ink pad recently for fall. So I think this is one of my very first times using it, but I really like how it looks with the Bundled Sage. I added that to the grass line and then just blended back over it with the Bundled Sage. So that's how that's looking, but I want to do a bit of splatter detail. So I'm going to press some of the Salvage Patina onto an acrylic block, and then on the other end I'll do the Forest Moss, and then I'll add a little bit of water to each of those. I'm going to start with the Salvage Patina. I'm going to mix that up with a thin paintbrush and tap it off the edge of the block to get a nice fine splatter detail. And I'm trying to concentrate it on the sky, but I don't mind if a little bit of the blue transfers into the grass, and then the same with the grass. I'm going to concentrate it on the green part, but I don't mind if a little bit gets up in the sky. Once that has fully dried, I will pop it in my MISTI so I can stamp my sentiment. I'm doing that in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And I'm doing I Hope Your Day is Literally the Best, which I just love this sentiment so much. And then I can set that aside to dry and pop my card base in my MISTI. I made that out of some speckled eggshell cardstock, and I am stamping on the inside in walnut ink. And I took another little image from the Little Woodland Library, which is the owl holding a book, and the sentiment, Find Your Happy Place, which is also from that same set, which I think is such a great sentiment, especially for the inside of a card. So I'm doing something a little bit unusual today. So normally I would choose some pattern paper and start assembling my card and then do my images. That's usually the way that I prefer to do it. I like to see the whole card coming together at once. But for today, I could not decide which color pattern paper I wanted to go with because there were so many different options within the color palette that I had used. So I'm actually going to assemble everything on just the focal panel first, and then I'm going to choose my pattern paper. So I've added some foam tape to the back of my treat cart and also the stump, which we'll get to in just a minute. But I wanted the owl and also the coffee machine to look like they were recessed into the treat cart, and that the awning was the part that was sticking out. So I added those before I am adhering them down, and I just added a bit of liquid glue behind the owl and the coffee machine so that they are on the same level as the card. And then I'm going to kind of do the same thing with the stump. I'm going to have the critters that are going to be sitting behind it attached with the foam tape. So it's going to be the bunnies and also the skunk. And I need to adjust the bunnies down a bit so that I have room for that sentiment and the mama's ears don't cover it up. Unfortunately, I did lose most of the little acorn that I stamped on the book that way, but it just couldn't be helped. But I think this is a fun way to add extra dimension to your scene by adding the critters that are behind an object flat to the card and then popping the object up so that it brings it forward to the viewer's eye. And then I also added just a thin strip of foam tape to the bottom of the fox and then liquid glue above, because he's going to be laying down at the base of that stump reading his little book. And then to balance him out, I'm going to add the sandwich board sign to the bottom left corner, kind of overlapping the front of the treat cart. Then I'm going to figure out the placement of the rest of these little critters here. I wanted one of them to be sitting on the little stump, and I decided that is going to be the mole. I'm just adding a tiny little piece of foam tape in the gap between the big stump and the treat cart so that is popped up level and well supported. And then I'll add the mole on top with just some liquid glue because everything he's overlapping is already popped up. And then I'm going to add my little squirrel in the gap between the mole and the sandwich board sign. So just adding foam tape where necessary and liquid glue on anything that's already popped up. Next, I'm going to adhere my little garland of leaves because that needs to go back behind the mole's head. So I just lifted that up quickly to pop that in place. And then I can start adding all of these little accessory images to really fill in the rest of the scene. I always like to start with the main images, usually the big images first, or images that are going in the back, and then I work my way forward and then add in all of the little details. So I'm just playing with the placement of things here and there. I did one of the grasses on the left and one on the right, and then one down in the center, just so that's kind of balanced there. And then I was trying to figure out this little to-go coffee cup, which I thought I was going to give the squirrel, but I ended up not liking it there. I just thought it was too big for that space. So I'm going to pull that back up and just set it aside for now. Thankfully, I was able to wipe off the glue. And then I am going to go ahead and commit to the other two drinks that I want to be on the large stump. So one is going in front of the mama bunny and one is going in front of the little skunk. And then I'm also going to give him the apple cider donut. And then I'll add the little mug, the white mug down by the fox. And again, I'm just going to add a tiny little sliver of foam tape between the grass and that little book to help that be popped up on the same level. And then I have the little glasses, and I decided to put that back behind the little squirrel instead, as if he just got tired of wearing them and kind of took them off and set them aside for right now. So I popped that up on some foam tape as well. And then I played around with where to use this other to-go mug, and I ended up deciding to just have the owl hold that out as well, as if he's just making drinks left and right. For all of these customers who've come to his cart to have their little fall book club meeting, I am going to pop that up on some foam tape, and I'm going to try to position it so you can still see the yellow mug behind, so it just looks like he's in the middle of making lots of different drinks. And then all that's left is my colored leaves, so I'm going to start filling in the scene with those, and I want to have some of them flying in the air as well, as if there's like a nice little breeze, and so that's going to help me fill in some of the empty spaces in the sky as well. And I almost forgot about the muffin that was flipped over, and I thought it was a little leaf, so once I realized it was a muffin, I gave that to the baby bunny. And then again, I'm just kind of trying to add those leaves here and there so that they look like they're in movement. I'm turning some of them a little bit to the left or right or upside down or sideways just to make them look like they're more in motion. And this little one I'm actually going to even have kind of overlapping the top of the treat cart. And then I didn't like that there were two orange right next to each other, so I replaced the one on the left with a gold one and added the orange one down toward the base of the treat cart. So now that I have my focal panel all assembled, I'm going to go to my pattern paper pad, which is the new Falling Leaves 6x6 from Lawn Fawn, and I'm just testing it out with the different prints. I knew I wanted one of the leaf prints, and I actually really liked this kind of salmony pink. I thought it went really well with the tones that I had used on some of those books, like the R12 especially and the R14. And so I decided I'm going to use that one, and then I wanted something that would coordinate. And I'm sorry I'm a little bit too zoomed in right here. I will zoom out in just a second. I didn't realize that I was still so close for the assembling of the focal panel. So I decided to use the green plaid. I thought that went well with the background. So I just trimmed these down with my paper trimmer. So this piece here is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, same size as a standard size card. And the green is 2 1/2 by 5 1/2, and I'm going to run that across the center horizontally. So you'll just see a little bit of it on the left and the right. Then I will adhere my focal panel, and I'm just going to use liquid glue for that. I typically like to use only one level of foam tape on a card unless I know I'm going to be hand delivering it, just to make it easier for mailing. And then of course I had to add a little bit of Stardust Stickles. So I'm going to add that to all of my leaves, and I got a little clog in there, so it came out a little bit too quickly when I pressed too hard, so I just dabbed a little bit of that up with my fingers, and then I continued adding that. And I did also add it to the muffin and the glaze on the donut and my marshmallows and coffee. So that is going to finish off this card. I will lift that up so you can see all of the fun detail and give you another peek at the inside. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. I had so much fun coming up with this idea and figuring out what sets I would use to bring it to life, and I'm really pleased with how it came out. So if you enjoyed it too, please be sure to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Ring that notification bell if you want to be alerted when I post new videos. All of the products I used are listed and linked in the description bar below in case you'd like to pick up anything for yourself. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I will see you soon in another video. Bye-bye.